and this is our second time around. I'm very inspired by what's happening here in Nanaimo Ladysmith. This is the first time in our lifetimes where we can actually, truly vote without fear. So many of us have never experienced that before. And it's such a crazy concept that some people are having even trouble getting it, that there's no fear. We have nothing to risk in this by-election. There's one seat up for grabs, that's it. 337 seats are going to stay the same no matter what happens here in Nanaimo Ladysmith. This is an inconsequential by-election. There is only one result of consequence in this by-election, and that's when we elect Paul Manley and double the Green Party caucus in Ottawa. Any other result in this by-election is boring status quo. So we're very, very excited about it. A lot of things happened since 2015. The reasons why we're feeling so happy and optimistic here. The consciousness around climate change and environmental degradation has grown by orders of magnitude in people's consciousness. In 2015, you could go a whole week without anybody in the mainstream media in Canada mentioning climate change. These days, I can't actually stay on top of it. I try to read every story in Canada that mentions climate change or environmental degradation. I can't stay on top of it. It's a very sad reality, but it's actually, we're finally facing up to reality, and that is growing in everybody's consciousness. So that's great no matter what, because we need to face this situation. But other things that are making us feel very hopeful are, for one thing, there's no Harper in this by-election. Harper was such a terrible boogeyman that he just shut down people's capacity for critical thinking and for hope. And it's great not to have that figure now. And the other thing is the team. So Paul in 2015 was a first-time candidate. I was a first-time campaign manager. Everybody working on Paul's team was first-timers. We didn't really have any list to go by. But this time we have the list of the 1,500 people who took lawn signs last time. We have greater lists of members. We have lists of volunteers. And people are really coming out, and it's very exciting. At the office, every single day, 5 to 10 people show up to grab lawn signs. And the great thing about the 5 to 10 people that are showing up every day to grab lawn signs is that I have no idea who they are. I don't recognize them. I don't recognize their names. These are new people, and a lot of them are telling us that in the past they voted Liberal or NDP or Conservative, but they're done and they're ready to go for it this time, and it's just really, really inspiring. So for me, I've known Paul for 15 years. We've been close friends. He's been a great, loving and generous friend to me. I've spent time, I've lived in his house for weeks at a time when I was in between places. We've also done a lot of political things together. And for me and for the rest of our team to put the amount of energy and time that we're putting into this is because I honestly couldn't do this for anybody else. I'm not actually a professional campaigner, and if it wasn't Paul Manley running, I doubt that I would be doing this for anybody else. I'm actually quite sure that I wouldn't. Paul Manley is a person of just such deep integrity and commitment and compassion. He has stood firm on all the issues that matter to me. Every single progressive and environmental issue that has happened in the last 20 years in this town or since 2002, Paul has been either in the front line of it or an organizer or right up there, a supporter, an ally in every single event. And this is the only kind of personality, commitment, and love that I could see myself putting this kind of energy into. So it gives me great pleasure to introduce you to Paul Manley, the next MP for Nanaimo Ladysmith, the first ever Green MP for Nanaimo Ladysmith, and the person who's going to double the Green Party caucus in Ottawa. Oh, sorry, Lolly Good first. Ooh, sorry. I am so sorry. This shows how much I am overworked at this very moment. I'm so sorry, Lolly. We are an unceded Nanaimo First Nations territory, And I'd like to invite Lolly to give a blessing, and please, my sincerest, deepest apologies. I'm doing too much.
I'm okay down here. I can do on the microphone. I think I'm loud enough. I said I think I'm loud enough. Siemna Sofans, Siemna Sietya, Siemna Shkwalakwa, Antapet Schweitzolwe, Lolitanas, Juanitamas Nasquish, Tunisan Ak Nanaimo, E Krolo Ak Sisha. Hai Sapka, E Quansmite Solitanaqueo, Hai Sapka, Nanaimo Shi CME Mastimo, Tlashan Sap Mak Us Kacha Tama. Honored friends, relatives, elders, I was born and raised Nanaimo, extended family root Seashell. Thank you everyone for gathering here today. Thank you. Nanaimo Chief Mike Wise and Council, welcome you all to our sacred land / traditional territory. After I recite this prayer, I'm going to be doing a song. Some of you know my traditional Ike Squale song. Sadly, I had forgotten my instruments, but you know what? You've got your hands in your mouth. That's your instruments today. After I recite the prayer, I'd like some of you to come forward and help me with my Ike Squale song to lift up your evening. I ask that you think of your family and your loved ones, your friends. Please stand. Sisif Siem, Haichka Atanaquel, Bihum, Lalamatha, Atakikalis, Ikaki Mastimo, Haichka Atasaftis Atanaquel, Bihum, we Atslachen Atalateins, Sisif Siem Bihum, Apatopus Atanaquel, Demuxquel, Stilotmanste. Creator, thank you for this day. Please look after those that are grieving and those that are sick. Thank you for the food today. Please bring blessing and medicine to our tables. Creator, please help us today and every day. Amen. So can I have some brave people come forward? Use your instruments, your mouth, and your hands. We're going to clap. And you'll be saying, I swear on. Awesome. You got to lift my spirits up. You say Ike Squale, nice and loud. Ike Squale. One more time. Ike Squale. There you go. That's what I want to hear.
Thank you for that awesome intro, Willan. And thank you, Lolly, for opening the prayer with us. We are on the traditional territory of the Nanaimo First Nation, and I've learned a lot from the Nanaimo people. I do a lot of work with Nanaimo locally. I've done elder stories. I've videotaped the construction of your gym. I've gone down to do the paddles. I've worked with Paul Wise Seaward's band and documented their dance group. I've worked with some of the other nations that this Nanaimo Ladysmith riding is on as well. So I've worked with Nanawis. I translated the dictionary for them. I've done work with Staminas, with the Hulkaminum Treaty Group, doing videos there. I've done work with the Hulkaminum Health Hub to teach people about the Hulkaminum culture and why it's important for people in the healthcare industry to understand that culture and to work with that culture when people are seeking help. I grew up in this area. My grandfather had a farm just out off Jingle Pot Road, and that's where my dad grew up, went to school here, and he was a minister at Nanaimo, in Ladysmith, United Church minister, and so we moved there grade 4 to grade 10. And so this is my home. This is where I'm from. And growing up in Ladysmith was awesome. I love this place. And Ammonite Falls, we used to just call it the Falls because it was out behind my grandfather's place. And the road that lands at the top of the falls used to go right down through my grandfather's property. And so this is who I am, this place. I moved to Ottawa when my dad became a member of Parliament when I was 16, and finished off high school there and studied music at Humber College. I was in the jazz program and was a professional musician, but then I was inspired by the work of my mother. My folks are here, Jim and Eva. My mother was doing films about social justice and human rights, and I didn't think I was going to change the world as a rock and roll musician, so I went back to school for broadcasting. And when I started going to school in 1989, I became a father by adoption. And suddenly I had a 3-year-old calling me dad. And then the future became very personal to me because I could see that this child was going to have to live with the world that we were leaving behind. She was going to inherit what we did. And in 1991, I read David Suzuki's book, A Matter of Survival, and I understood. I grew up in a family of activists and for peace and social justice and environmental issues. I remember going to the Free Leonard Peltier rallies when I was 7 years old, dropping leaflets for the NDP when I was 9. Got chased off my first porch, 9 years old. They got to get kids to do your dirty work. So I was raised in that kind of environment. And when I became a dad, though, I really kicked down. Like I had to double down on my activism. And as a young man, I was involved in 18 years old, helping to take down the fence for the Armex conference in Ottawa, where they had an arms bazaar where they were selling weapons to the who's who of dictators around the world. And we thought that was a disgusting way to be using public space in Ottawa. Our civic arena is not the place for an arms bazaar where you're selling fighter jets and tanks. So we took down the fence and we shut down Armex, and it was gone for a couple of decades. They've brought it back there now, and I think it needs to go again. But being a father made the future personal to me. And, so when I graduated from broadcasting, I made a pledge to myself that I would never make any video or television production that I didn't want to watch myself, or I didn't want my children to watch, or I wouldn't have to explain to my grandchildren how I was wasting my time while we were dealing with all of these crises facing us. Climate change, destruction of our ecosystems, war, famine. I didn't want to waste my time, and so I've held to that. After graduating, one of the first documentaries I made was The Awakening of Elizabeth Shaw, historic documentary. My parents have been involved in social justice movements for as long as I can remember, but being a United Church minister, when Willie Blackwater was bringing his case forward about the Alberni residential school, my parents sat with Willie through that whole process. And my father found a letter written in 1898 by a woman named Elizabeth Shaw, who went to the Port Simpson's residential school and wrote this 18-page scathing letter about the abuse that was going on in that home and how they were treating the children. Over 120 years ago, documented. And my dad found the rest of the letters, and we made a film about it and broadcast across Canada and on the provincial television networks, and it's part of the school curriculum here in British Columbia. And then I went down to Guatemala with my folks too. I had a friend who was, I bought one of the first digital editing systems in Vancouver. It was $250,000. And I learned how to use that system. And I trained people at Rogers and advertising agents and all these people that came to the nonprofit organization I was working at, trained them how to use it. And a friend of mine, he knew I knew how to use that equipment, phoned me up and said, "You got to come down to San Francisco, buddy. I'm doing got this killer gig. We're in this huge editing facility with a big screen and projector as you're editing. The ad executives roll up in their limousines. They've got trays of food and beer and wine and cognac and trays of cocaine. And I'm making $120,000 US a year. It's the killer. We're making advertisements for Budweiser and Nike, and they're going to be on the Super Bowl." And I was like, "Sorry, dude, I am not working for Nike. I'm on my way to Guatemala to follow around a labor activist who was trying to get better working conditions for people who were working in sweatshops in Guatemala, and she was receiving death threats. And we interviewed 14-year-old girls who were making fishing lures for people in North America in a room that had no ventilation and filled with toxic air, where a light bulb exploded and ignited everything, and these poor girls were scarred for life and burned. And I was doing it on my own dime, and I have no interest in going and working for corporations like Nike who use sweatshop labor. So I did human rights accompaniment in Chiapas, lived in a village to just monitor military incursions into the community where the indigenous people there were being intimidated and threatened and dealing with violence. And then I had been working in television, so I did the first preschool show on APTN. I was the co-producer for it, and helped Dana Claxton and her sister and brother make this pilot, and we ended up doing the first preschool show on APTN, 64 episodes, and then we did a preteen show. And then in the 2000s, I also was managing bands because a friend had asked me to help him manage his band, and I got them a record deal with Atlantic Records in the United States and Ryco in Europe, and I toured them all over North America and all over Europe. When I was in my off time from working in television, the season is six months of work, and you have to do something else during that time. So I would either make films or I would do this work. The band broke up, everything went reality TV, and I had choices to make. The choice for me for making television was a show called Singles and another one called Manhattan Matchmaker, and they were all about people signing off on their lives and then being set up for failure and then zooming in on the tears while they break down. And I was just like, this is unethical and I don't want to be part of this. And do you have any other, I asked the producer, do you have any other shows I could work on? He said, well, you don't like this? I said, I wouldn't want to watch this for half an hour, let alone edit it for 40 hours. And that was the last time I talked to that producer. He wasn't interested in working with me, and I wasn't interested in what he was doing. So I started just doing my own docs. Well, I had my own sort of midlife crisis because I was suddenly out of work, and rather than going and buying a sports car, I went to VIU and I got a degree in global studies and media studies because I wanted to learn more about policy making, and I wanted to learn more about disseminating messages. And so I went and got my degree. Did we lose the PA system?
Sounds like we lost that.
Okay.
This way, this
It dropped anyway.
way. You have glass in the water.
I got vocal power. You can hear me? So, yeah, I started making documentaries, and one of the ones that I did was You, Me, and the SPP about the Security and Prosperity Partnership. Do people here know about the SPP? Anybody? Hands up? A few of you. Okay, so you probably know about the situation. The SPP was what happened after 9/11, where they wanted to create Fortress North America. And so that was like deep integration of our military, security, and police infrastructure, but also harmonizing regulations between the three countries. And it was a process of harmonizing to the lowest common denominator. Not like in Europe where standards go up. In the SPP process, they were all going down. And the SPP, the standards and harmonization was determined by 20 corporations from each country. And in Canada, we were represented by some great Canadian corporations like Home Depot Canada, Walmart Canada, Chevron Canada, Ford Canada. Of course, so that sound like great Canadian names to you, right? Anyway, I was appalled by what was going on, and the more I learned about it, the more I was like, I gotta make a film about this. And then I went to Montebello, where there was a leadership summit, and George Bush and Felipe Calderon were meeting with Stephen Harper. And I was following around Maud Barlow, and I heard this guy yelling. And I turned around, and it was Dave Coles, president of the Communication, Energy, and Papers Workers Union. And he was telling these guys, like, drop the rock, put that rock down. And these three big, burly guys, one with with masks on, looking like radicals, rock in hand and bottles in their pocket. And these skinny little vegans are going, these guys are cops. They're trying to get us to throw rocks, right? And these guys were pushing into the riot squad, bang a rock into the riot squad, face plant a riot squad member. And we're videotaping this, and it's like a freak show. It's a scary little situation. We're at the beginning of what could be a riot and the riot squad like reacting. And so Dave Coles reached in and pulled a mask off, and I had my camera, $7,000 in my hand, and reached in and pulled a mask off this great big guy, and I had their faces. And then they were taken down by the police, nice and gentle. My sister's a police officer, and she looked at that and she went, oh, that's kind of odd. And then we looked at the rest of the footage, and it's like, oh, all their boots match. Isn't that interesting? So they were 3 police officers, and they were wearing their duty boots, union rules. So that became an international video. It became an international news story. I actually videotaped 3 police provocateurs, and then that drew attention to the SPP. Why would they be, trying to incite violence at a peaceful protest about the SPP? Why? What don't they want us to know? It was all, Stephen Harper talked about conspiracies and harmonizing jelly beans and all this other stuff. And it was all right there on the US website. They had a full website about the SPP. But shortly after releasing my film, the SPP was disbanded. 6 months later, it's gone. That's the tool of education. My first real big win with video actually was in Victoria at the watershed. They were logging the watershed, and there was all this sediment flowing into the watershed, and there was boil water advisories that kept on happening. And people were saying, it's because you're logging, and you're logging too much. And the water district was going, no, the logging has nothing to do with it. So I trespassed into the watershed with Vicky Husband, who is the head of the Sierra Club, and Mehdi Najari, who is from Western Canada Wilderness Committee. And we had a great big camera, 30-pound camera, big porta-pack. And every time we heard a truck coming, we had to hit the ditch and hide. And then we finally got in there, and they decimated everything. And they logged right down to the creek, and they had to rebuild the creek with boulders to stop the sediment, like the erosion going into the lake. And we flew over the next day in a Cessna, same camera, like trying to poke it out of the airplane window. Well, this huge, you could see there was a big rain, and there was huge plumes of sediment. So I put that footage on my show on Rogers. When I graduated from broadcasting, when I went into broadcasting, 95% of the grads had jobs. When I graduated, 5% had jobs because CBC shut down half their plants and laid off half their employees. I didn't let that deter me. I decided to do my own show on Rogers and see if I could find money to make that happen. I put it on that show, and then I gave all the footage to CTV, CBC, Czech, and Global, and within 10 days there was a moratorium on logging in that watershed, and they haven't logged in it since. Images are a powerful tool, I learned. And I was in that watershed 15 years later with making a film for the Water District about the value of an intact watershed. You know, because when the rain falls, it goes down through the larger trees and hit the smaller trees and then the bushes and then into the moss, and everything just seeps down nicely and gently into the swamplands, and the water is all filtered naturally, and it's a beautiful thing. You know, that's the natural ecosystem. Those are services that are provided to us by nature. And that's what he was, you know, wanting to teach these kids. And I told him, I said, the last time I was in here, I was trespassing, doing an expose on logging. He was like, you're that guy. So yes, I am. And he goes, thank you very much. Because they knew there was people in the water district that knew this is the wrong thing to do, but we're logging it to raise money for infrastructure that we wouldn't need if we let the natural infrastructure do its work, right? So Victoria is one of those places where they own their watershed on Vancouver Island, and they pay a lot less for infrastructure, like for treatment and all that, because they have that natural infrastructure. So I did a film that included that. I did a film about the Nanaimo River called Voices of the River that looked at the Nanaimo River watershed, and I did an expose about them spraying fertilizer in the Nanaimo River watershed. And you know, the forest company wouldn't give me the footage, but they showed it to me how it kind of worked. They'd be flying along. See, you see, there's a stream right there, and we stop spraying, and then we keep on flying, and we spray again. I was like, whatever. Like doesn't it rain up there? You know, doesn't everything kind of flow into that stream and then into the lake and into our drinking water? And there was just before that, some tree planters had all been poisoned up there. The fertilizer that they were using had dioxin, furans, and it had heavy metals in it, and they were all getting rashes and nosebleeds and headaches. And nobody would test that fertilizer, so they paid to have it tested themselves. So that's all in my film Voices of the River, as well as all the connections to the rivers. Nanaimo, everybody that likes to swim there, the fishers, the loggers, the water for Harmac, all of that is all part of that story. And I made another film called Troubled Water because people were going to me, do you know what's going on in Parksville? Hey, do you know what's going on in Port Alberni? Do you know what's going on in Shawnigan? And filling me with information. And I sometimes get to this point where I get tired of telling stories, repeating information. So now they ask me about watersheds, I'll just say, hey, you should check out my film, Troubled Water. It's available for free on YouTube. Just look up Manly Media and Films. You can find my channel and watch that film, and it's used for educational purposes all over the place. And that's, the east coast of Vancouver, Island, 20% of Vancouver Island is private land because we wanted to build a railway that joined all the capitals for Confederation. So these are all things I've been working on. I got my degree. I learned how to write policy, and I decided that rather being on the outside all the time, like sometimes with the placard going, hey, you should change this, change that, or with a video camera and trying to educate people about, so they can go out and go, you should change this, change that, right? I thought maybe I'll get into politics and follow in my father's footsteps. I've been following along my mother's footsteps for a while, and I get into politics and follow in my father's. And so I decided to run for the NDP. I was an orange diaper baby. I canvassed with Tommy Douglas on my 16th birthday to get my dad elected. And they wouldn't let me run. And they wouldn't let me run because I had defended my father. My father, as I told you, my parents were involved with First Nations here and Indigenous people here and Indigenous people in Central America. And then they turned their eyes to Israel and Palestine. And my father was on a boat to Gaza, 45-meter sailboat with members of parliament from Europe. And he was seized illegally in international waters off of Egypt and taken away to an Israeli detention center. We had no idea where he was. We did not know how he was doing. He was about to turn 80 there. And I was the family member that was at home, so I answered all the questions from the media. I actually found out from Global that my father was in detention. And then I asked my MP, Jean Crowder, who we had helped get elected. And I said, can you speak out for my dad? Can you find out what's going on? She's like, I can't. I know it's terrible, but I'm not allowed to talk about this. I'm like, what? You're my member of parliament. And this is a federal issue. This is an international incident. You should be the one that's stepping up, right? You got to talk to the foreign affairs critic. I'd already been talking to, sending emails to the government and, the MP up here, forget his name now, James Lunny, was just, saying, your dad got what he deserves, he can rot in there, right? That's the answer I got from the other MP in Nanaimo. So I tried to get a hold of Paul Dewar, and he was busy going to parties and galas and stuff like that and tweeting about it. So I was tweeting at him going, hey, Paul, I need your help. I need somebody to help me on the federal level with my father. And no answer. So I wrote a letter the next morning, maybe that night, I'm not sure, but I wrote a letter. And it basically said, what is the matter with you people? Here's an elder statesman in your party who has stepped up for human rights again and again and again. And now he is in trouble, and he needs your help, and he needs you to speak out for him. Tommy Douglas would have spoken out for my dad. What is the matter with you people? And that letter got leaked. And it was sent to Peter O'Neill, who's a journalist for the Ottawa Citizen and Vancouver Sun. And he phoned me the next day and he said, is this your letter? I said, does it have my name on it? He said, yeah. Well, what do you think? Do you mean what you said? Did I write it? Absolutely. I mean it. Yeah, I'm standing up for my dad. Somebody's got to do it. Elizabeth May did it. I asked Elizabeth May actually at that very day. I was at a No Pipeline rally when I got that call. I was in the middle of working. I was videotaping at the rally and following around Maud Barlow. I was on the national board for the Council of Canadians for 3 years, but I did lots of media work for them. And that's when I got the call, and I talked to Elizabeth, and she made some calls and spoke out. And that's what an MP is supposed to do, If you elect me and you get yourself in trouble doing the right thing anywhere on the planet, you can count on me. I will speak up for you. Absolutely. You don't have to be a blood relation. So, in 2000, I had another daughter, and that really stepped up my activism again, made me even more determined, because I just keep feeling like we're going the wrong way here. We are going the wrong way. And, I just needed to work harder. And I did end up running. Elizabeth May phoned me. I'd sent a letter to my supporters when I was rejected by the NDP. I sent it on a Friday at around 4 o'clock on Canada Day long weekend, thinking, my supporters will get this and that'll be it, and too bad, so sad. And on Tuesday when I popped open my computer, it was a national news story on the front page. So Elizabeth May phoned me up.
Of course.
Yeah, and said, I know you're hurting right now, but I really want you to think about working with me. And I'd known Elizabeth for 30 years. I used to be a canvasser for Friends of the Earth when she was the executive director. But it was at an Earth Day festival in Ottawa and that I was playing at. I was the front man for the headline act, playing for about 1,000 people at the conference center in Ottawa, and Elizabeth was one of the keynote speakers, and I was singing our top 10 song on college radio, which was about Ronald McDonald, called Rotten Ronnie. I was not impressed with that clown. And so Elizabeth asked me to run, and I said, nah, I'm not feeling it. Like Orange Diaper Baby, I've been doing this. It's hard to switch, it's hard to change your mind about things. My grandfather was a CCF member, and she kept talking to me, and then she gave me this, Vision Green, the policy book, and I read this. I love Elizabeth. I know she's brilliant. I would run into her at events with the Council of Canadians, and and chat, but this is what really got me going. Because this book is a vision for our future. It's not about the next 4-year cycle of politics. It's not a book about compromising the future of our children and our grandchildren. It's a book that is visionary. It's looking at where we want to be in 10 years, in 20 years, in 30 years. There's a little girl I met here today, 5.5 years old, Fallon. This book is for you, Fallon. This book is a vision for your future. So I ran in 2015. We had the closest 4-way race in Canada. And after people came up to me and said, man, I'm so sorry. I just couldn't do it. I really wanted to support you. But I was afraid. I was afraid of, the Conservatives winning this riding. I was afraid of Stephen Harper getting another 4 years. I just couldn't do it. And, if you asked me then if I was going to run again, I would be like, I don't know, but I probably not. But I saved all my signs. I put them in my parents' cabin. And I saved them all. And then 2 months after the election, my oldest daughter phoned me up and said, Dad, I'm pregnant. And I became a grandfather. I became a grandfather in 2016 in July. And that little girl, Marina, is going to be 3 years old this summer. And again, the future is personal. The future is personal. But it's not just about my children and grandchildren. It's about all the children. It's about their future. And I am sick and tired. I'm sick and tired of politicians who talk about climate change and what we need to do about climate change, but then approve and promote fossil fuel infrastructure like fracking. That's a climate killer. That is called climate action delaying, and it's just as bad as climate deniers. They are behaving like climate deniers. They want to frack in the Northeast. They're given a $6 billion, gift to 5 foreign multinationals. LNG Canada is not a Canadian company. LNG Canada consists of 2 private corporations, Shell's one of them, and 3 multinational state-owned corporations. It has nothing to do with Canada. And the idea that we're going to pay for social programs and healthcare by fracking our climate is ridiculous. You want healthcare? Healthcare starts with taking care of our environment. Our environment, we need a clean environment to live, to survive. The environment is what we inherit. The economy is what we create. That's the business we do with each other. We can change the economy, but if we mess up the environment, we're in serious trouble. And we are in serious trouble. When I see, the environment minister on Facebook at Canadian Tire telling us, how we can buy light bulbs and shower heads at Canadian Tire so we could do something about climate change. But in the meantime, her government bought a pipeline to export bitumen. I'm like, what is this? This is nonsense. I changed my light bulbs decades ago. I've done 2 home energy retrofits. I have a home that I lived in. I did a retrofit in a cabin in the back that I got no grants for at all. And I did that and I rent that out, and my tenants love it because they live in a energy efficient house built in 1910. It's an Energy Star. Got a heat pump. They have low energy bills. The cabin is rented to a friend of mine who's, he's a senior. He's on disability, fixed income, but he doesn't have to worry about his energy bills because he lives in an energy efficient building. I've done the same with my own home that I live in now. I don't need a lesson on changing my light bulbs anymore. I need you to stop promoting fossil fuel infrastructure. That's enough of that. That is so much.
Yeah, watch your language now.
Yeah, that is so much stuff that I'm not interested in. I'm really fed up with it, quite honestly. And they tell us, oh, we need this, it's good for the economy. I'm on the board for Mid-Island Co-op. I've been on that board for 11 years, and I've helped that organization grow from a $50 million a year operation. It's now $188 million this year. And Mid-Island Co-op is one of 150 co-ops that owns Federated Co-ops. And Federated Co-ops owns the 7th largest refinery in Canada. And in the last 10 years, they put $3 billion into that refinery. Do you know why? Anybody? Because there's a market in Canada for oil and gas. And you know what? We can't get a supply from that refinery to Vancouver Island. Or even to the mainland. It's as far as they can get it is the interior. So where do we get our gas and oil from? We import it. We import it from the United States. And yet what they want to do is put an export pipeline to export more products so we can continue to import. If they were interested in jobs, then what they would be promoting is an upgrader in Alberta. And I'm not interested in any more fossil fuel infrastructure. If they proposed this 10 years ago and did this 10 years ago, you know, it would have made sense. Because they could have provided synthetic crude to the Chevron refinery in Burrard Inlet, where that pipeline ends now. That refinery doesn't get enough feedstock to run at capacity. They could have, you know, instead of Energy East, which was to go all the way to St. John's, New Brunswick, you know, past the refineries in Sarnia, Ontario, past the refineries in Montreal and Quebec, all the way to St. John's. Why was it going there? To export, so that Quebec and Ontario could still import refined product from Saudi Arabia and Algeria. Like, come on, you want jobs? You want to promote jobs? Then let's use our resources here to serve Canadians. But that's not what they were asking for. That's not what they wanted. That's not what they want. They want to export that stuff. And who benefits from that?
Koch brothers.
The Koch brothers, the Shell Canadas of the world. It's lining the coffers of corporations. They say, oh, we need it for social programs. In Alberta, did you know that alcohol, tobacco, and gaming provide more income to the government than oil and gas revenue? Hey? Who's bamboozling who? We're being sold a bill of goods. You know, Alberta, they need to get it together. I wish the people there would understand some of these things. They've been ripped off for their resources. The First Nations people there have been ripped off for those resources, and it's all been going into corporate piggy banks. Piggies. I've had enough of it. I've had enough of the lies and the BS, and so I am running again, because we need to do something about this. We need to speak truth to power in Ottawa. And Elizabeth May needs help. We are the only party that opposes fracking, and we need a fracking moratorium in Canada. Enough fracking with our climate. Enough fracking with our health. Enough fracking nonsense. Yeah. These parties that talk about climate change and then carry on with their fossil fuel projects need to be told, and they need to be sent a strong message. And when you elect me on May 6th, you're going to send a surge of green energy blasting across this country. We're going to tell them we mean business. Tired of fooling around, and Elizabeth May needs help. She has been voted time and time again as the hardest working MP in Ottawa by her peers. She has been voted time and time again as the most effective MP for her constituents by her peers. Do you know how that happens? Elizabeth knows how to behave herself. She knows how to make friends. And it's actually in the beginning of this policy book, when you go and look online, it'll tell you how MPs are supposed to behave. How MPs are supposed to behave. No heckling. No pounding on the desk. No ad hominem attacks. Treat all your colleagues with respect, all the other MPs with respect, and do what is in the best interests of your constituents and Canadians. Work across party lines. That's how you get things done. People would, somebody had a question today earlier on about, well, what are you going to do about asphalt? You know, if you don't want any fossil fuel, we don't want to burn the stuff. You can still use bitumen, is great for making plastics. We're still going to need oil for certain things. Let's just stop lighting the stuff up. That's really stupid. You know, bitumen is way more valuable for making plastics. You can extract precious metals out of it for batteries. It's like, you know, just common sense stuff, isn't it, Elizabeth? It's common sense. So somebody needs to go to Ottawa and help Elizabeth with some common sense for her peers. And that's where you come in. So I'm hoping that you will get out there and work hard for me, because the only way we win elections is by going and talking to voters, talking to your friends, your neighbors, your co-workers. Come out with me and bang on doors and talk to people.
Knock politely on the
Knock politely. Knock politely. I always knock politely. And that is how we're going to win. Because Elizabeth May needs help, and she is going to take the floor now and explain to you why.
Oh, how do I make this go down? See, I need help.
Oop,
I can't
wrong
do
one.
anything all by myself here.
We're fixing you up.
Okay, thank you. So, speaking of working across party lines, one of the other federal candidates is here, and I want to make her feel welcome. Jennifer Clark is running for the People's Party, and I sit next to her leader in Parliament. So, hi, Jennifer. Her leader, Maxime Bernier, and I are seatmates, and we get along like a house on fire. We don't agree on a single thing, but we get along just fine. I wanted to say a bit more about this issue of pipelines and the incredible stories we've been told that just aren't true. And when Paul was talking about it, I thought it's so refreshing to have somebody else feel that intense anger that I often feel about how much we're being lied to. But here's just one little aspect of it that doesn't come out very much, because we're portrayed, I guess because our name is the Green Party, somehow or other as if we don't care about jobs. Now, by the way, I find that when other parties talk about jobs, it's coded language for corporate profits. Because if they cared about jobs, they'd have been protesting the extent to which the oil sands have been automating and laying off thousands and thousands of workers. I care about workers, care about people. We as Greens care about meaningful employment for every single person who wants a job. What we look at, though, is I actually do a lot of deep dive into homework. And I applied for intervenor status when the National Energy Board first opened the Kinder Morgan pipeline process in 2013. I was accepted as an intervenor, I think, in 2014. And I looked at the website, because all the information now, I'm turning 65 in June, so I'll fully confess that things online don't really work for me. I can't mark them up, I can't turn the pad. I know young people can do that, but I took the Kinder Morgan submission to the National Energy Board, took it to my local print shop, and printed it off. That was $800 I'll never get back, because it was 23,000 pages. And then I took it home, and I put it on my dining room table, all piles of it, and I went through it to take out everything that was duplicative and the same information over and over again. Now, that was about half of it. And I stuck it in one side of my living room, and then I kept going and taking it apart, looking for what might be useful. And that's how I really got a bead on what Kinder Morgan, why they make these reports really, really long to discourage anyone from trying to read all of it. And if it's online, people can say, well, I'm intervening, so I just want to look at the part that deals with what happens, how many water courses does the pipeline have to cross? Or I'm just going to look at the part to find out this or that allegation. Anyway, this is a long roundabout way of telling you that one of my dear colleagues and friends, also like Paul, a friend I made through working with Council of Canadians over the years, is a trade and environment lawyer named Stephen Schreibman, who was hired by Unifor, which of course is the largest union representing workers in northern Alberta. And Unifor also intervened in the Kinder Morgan pipeline process. And Unifor intervened to stop the pipeline. They said, just as Paul was saying to you, shipping out raw bitumen means shipping out jobs, just like shipping out whole logs means shipping out jobs, or shipping out fish to other countries to process them. By the way, you know, with fleet separation rules on the coast of BC under the Department of Fisheries and Oceans, fishermen can't afford to buy the license, they can only afford to buy the boat. So that's why we have the People's Republic of China holding licenses on wild BC salmon, which gets taken off immediately to the People's Republic of China. So when you're in your local grocery store looking for wild BC salmon, read the fine print, because you'll find on some of it, it will say processed and produced in the People's Republic of China. You may wonder how that happens. Fleet separation. So the fishermen don't get to own the fish anymore, bring it home and sell it. So the whole notion of an economy that's based on shipping out raw resources before any jobs can be obtained locally strikes Greens as a poor idea. We would like to maximize the value added on any natural resource of this country before we start shipping it out to another country, because we inevitably buy it back after other people have done the work, upgrading the bitumen, refining the bitumen, turning the raw logs into 2x4s and furniture, and we buy it back, or worse, chipping it for biofuel. All of this is insanity. Now, the main thing I wanted to tell you, though, about Unifor's submission to the National Energy Board that said, we're against the Kinder Morgan pipeline expansion as a union. So was the Alberta Federation of Labor when this process started, against the Kinder Morgan pipeline expansion, because shipping out raw bitumen means shipping out jobs. The National Energy Board response to that was to say, we can't accept this evidence. We reject it. Because on the list of issues this process review has to study, jobs and the economy are not on the list of issues we're supposed to study. So this evidence exceeds our jurisdiction. We reject it. So I got particularly angry when, for the second time, the National Energy Board came around to saying the Kinder Morgan pipeline project is approved, the expansion is approved, and this time around, after having to redo the evidence because the permits were quashed in August because the National Energy Board and the federal cabinet failed to review the impact of what happens when the tankers leave Burrard Inlet, and what's the risk of a spill, and what's the risk to the southern resident killer whales. All of that was viewed by the National Energy Board as outside the scope of their inquiry. So they, as you know, they had to go back, they did a quickie review, and they said, well, all right, now we know it's true that the expansion of the Kinder Morgan pipeline project, which, by the way, we now own, can all be quietly proud, we have this little thing together, all of us together are, God help us, we are all shareholders in a pipeline we don't want. But they said, all right, now we know for sure that expanding the Kinder Morgan pipeline will threaten the survival of southern resident killer whales. Now we know for sure that a worst case scenario spill of bitumen and diluent, which they have to mix the diluent into the bitumen. We keep talking about the solid thing they're going to export. To get it to flow through a pipeline, they stir in the diluent. Now we know for sure that if that spilled, it would be a major economic loss to southern Vancouver Island, to the lower mainland. It would be all of Vancouver Island would be at risk from the spill if it happens. And then the National Energy Board also added it would be a significant increase in greenhouse gases. So they listed what they'd studied, all negatives. And then they said, but we recommend the federal cabinet provide a permit because of the economic benefits, which I happen to know, although no one else seems to have noticed because the national media never covered it. They refused to study. They have zero evidence of the benefits, massive evidence of the risks. And yet we're in this, as Paul said, getting sick of the lies we're being fed. We've also been the recipients in British Columbia and across Canada of the government of Alberta spending tens of millions of dollars lying to us. I didn't know governments could lie to us in paid ads until we challenged what Alberta was peddling and found that truth in advertising laws don't apply to governments. So, speaking of people in Alberta who are speaking truth to power, I'm so proud of all of the Green parties around the world. But right now, I don't think there's any Green party around the world I'm more proud of than the Alberta Green Party in this election, shut out of the debate. I don't even know if you know that the leader of the Green Party of Alberta is Cree. Her name is Cheryl Chagnon Grey Eyes, And she and a lot of Green Party candidates are leading the charge to talk about what it looks like when there are good jobs from renewable energy in Alberta. I was just touring with her, and she told me this amazing story of Chief Leo Stonechild, who has, whose territory is west of Calgary. And he initially, okay, full disclosure, he initially thought he could make money out of oil. And he bought up some of those orphaned deep oil wells that were abandoned. You probably saw the Supreme Court of Canada decision about the Redwater bankruptcy, that oil companies can't walk away from their liabilities of orphaned wells. Even in bankruptcy, the Supreme Court of Canada says they have to clean them up. Of course, I don't know how we enforce this, because our history is the corporations walk away and they leave the liabilities for the taxpayers to pay for. But Chief Leo Stonechild bought a couple of the orphaned wells and figured, okay, the companies abandoned them, but there's got to be some oil down there, and if oil goes up to over $100 a barrel, we can make some money on it. But after a while, he realized oil wasn't going to go up over $100 a barrel. But he's a genius. Then he realized, geothermal. Geothermal, I wonder if we can use these abandoned deep oil wells to produce renewable energy from geothermal. Because you know what the biggest cost is of installing geothermal? The drilling. So we have all these, when we think about what's possible in shifting from a fossil fuel economy that frankly is a threat to our survival, to a renewable green economy with solar energy and wind energy and geothermal and tidal power and run-of-the-river hydro. We don't need a single new big dam. We don't need Site C. God help us. We should shut down Site C till it drags us in to the red ink. But when I think of the possible, and that's what I'm thinking about all the time, we have to, in Parliament, we're constantly debating issues that don't fundamentally, they're not fundamentally life and death. They're important questions. Frankly, I'm very committed to the constitutional principle of prosecutorial independence. But we don't focus on what really matters, and we don't work together very well, and we really should. Because what we're up against right now, and it was David Korten, a US economist, said this many years ago, that we're past the point where it's about the isms. It's not about capitalism versus communism or socialism versus capitalism. In terms of the great struggle right now on this planet, it's the battle between life and money. And we have to take the side of life. We have to take the side of this biosphere. We have to take the side, as my Indigenous friends have always said in opening prayers, that wherever you are across Canada, you hear people say, all my relations. And it's only been in recent years I've realized it's not just their human relations. We're talking about being related to the southern resident killer whale, related to the salmon, related to the eagles. And I see my constituents now. My job as the Member of Parliament for Saanich Gulf Islands is to represent all the human beings in Saanich Gulf Islands, whether they voted for me or not, and also to represent my constituents who can't vote, like the southern resident killer whales, like the salmon, like the forests, like the streams, like eagles. And my favorite, most punctual of birds, the bufflehead duck. I am the MP for the bufflehead ducks, and I am the MP for a place where people are willing to say we're not going to do things the way we always used to do them. We're going to break through to do something really unusual. And a whole lot of people who for 14 years had a member of, well, he wasn't always in Stephen Harper's cabinet, but for 14 years before I ran in 2011, the Member of Parliament for Saanich Gulf Islands was Conservative, and by the time I defeated him, he was a member of Stephen Harper's cabinet. And all the people who elected me, one thing that happened was people turned out to vote who normally don't vote. We had 75% voter turnout when I was elected in 2011. It was the highest in the country. And so I love my constituents, the ones who can vote and the ones who can't vote, and the ones who are too young to vote. But right now, the chance your vote in Nanaimo Ladysmith is the most powerful ballot could possibly be imagined, because we're in an election year where we've never had issues that matter as much. We know, and Paul's spoken to it, we know from the IPCC report that we got in October that it's not a matter of a political choice to try to hold to 1.5 degrees Celsius global average temperature increase. It's a matter of survival. It's literally a matter of survival to do that. We're told by the world scientists we can do it. There's no law of physics or chemistry or biology that prevents us from saving life on Earth. And we're not in need of new technology. And the economics are good. The price of solar panels has plummeted to such an extent that in most places in the world, it's cheaper to install solar than to mine coal and burn it. We are at an exciting moment of possibility because we have everything we need to save ourselves. And what the IPCC said in their report in October was, the only thing we're missing is something they call political will. But I'll say it's political courage. It's the willingness to look past, oh, if I do the right thing, I might lose the next election. How in anyone's mind losing the next election is more important than the threat of losing your children's future forever? If that window closes on holding to 1.5, we don't get another chance. So I see the possibility. And the possibility has to be real. And your ballot in this election, as Paul was saying, you've got the one and only, Elan was saying this, you've got the one and only election happening on May 6th. It doesn't change the government. You might want to change the government. You might deeply like the idea of Justin Trudeau being replaced by Andrew Scheer or Jagmeet Singh, or me, you might love that idea. But in this by-election, there's only one or two things that can happen. And the only one that makes a really significant difference, if the NDP hang on to Nanaimo Ladysmith, the media will yawn and say, well, it was an NDP riding, so that doesn't change anything. It's a status quo decision. The decision that really changes everything is saying, all right, let's send a message. Let's send a shot across the bow to all the old line parties that don't think Canadians care enough about the climate emergency to make that the reason they vote the way they vote. If in this election, on May 6th in Nanaimo Ladysmith, you send Paul Manley to Ottawa to work with me, I can promise you two things. One is, I give you a 100% voter back guarantee. If you don't like him in 5 months, you send him back. It's fine. It's a safe deal. It's like those ads on TV. But wait, there's more. He slices, he dices, he chops, and you can get 100% back, a voter back guarantee. Paul Manley, May 6th, October 21st. Then you decide if you want to keep him. But if you want to make a difference in this country's election in 2019, that's the other thing that's going to happen. You send Paul Manley to Ottawa with me. We'll make you really proud. We'll work really hard in the time left in this parliamentary session. We'll work so hard as a constituency MP, you won't have to wonder if someone's going to return your phone call or pick up the phone and try to fix a problem with your pension or help refugees get into a community blocked by the bureaucracy that just doesn't move. I know how to help a new MP be super effective at constituency work because my little team in Ottawa extends to other ridings. I wasn't even going to tell this story. Can I tell one more story?
Go ahead.
Okay. Because I don't know how many of you remember when an elder from Penellicut was about to be deported. Richard Germain on Penellicut Island had been arrested. Believe it or not, an elder, a grandfather on Penellicut, who was Indigenous but originally from California and had moved to Penellicut, met, married, had a family, a huge community leader, leading the charge that on the grounds of that horrific residential school in Penellicut, they were rebuilding and planting a community organic garden. Richard Germain always gave to the community, continues to give to this community. And just before Christmas, I think it was 2013, before Christmas, the Border Services people, with no warning, it wasn't like he got a letter saying you ought to regularize your citizenship. He never thought about it. They showed up at his doorstep, arrested him, put him in leg irons, threw him in a van and drove him to a holding cell in Vancouver to be deported. Yeah. And it did make the Vancouver Sun, it did make the Globe and Mail at some point, But his family called their MP, and they called all the MPs on Southern Vancouver Island, and nobody responded because of this bureaucracy that Paul referenced. It's not just the NDP that does this, it's all the parties. They say, okay, you're the critic for environment, so you can't talk about Indigenous issues, or you're the critic for whatever. So Gene Crowder was the critic for Indigenous issues, so Murray Rankin's office said when they called him, well, you're in luck, because your MP is Gene Crowder, and she's the MP for Indigenous issues. But for some reason, which is strange, because I think Gene was usually pretty responsive, there was no response, and Richard Germain was set to be deported within 48 hours. And fortunately, Fiona Chambers, who's an ethnobotanist working at UVic, who was working with Richard, called me. And I got out a press release. I ended up talking to Joanne Roberts on the afternoon show within 24 hours. We found a benefactor to hire a lawyer so that we could stop the refugee deportation. We got Richard back home to his family before Christmas. And the other refugees in that holding cell were aware now how many people are grabbed and snatched and sent away. But the guards, the Canadian Border Service Agency, said to Richard Germain, who do you know? We've never seen anything like this happen. Not for anybody. Nobody gets out of here. Everybody gets deported. And I know that my team in my office are top-notch hard-working, because that's what we demand of ourselves in our team. All of my staff in the Sydney office, their title is constituent advocate. Someone comes to the door of our office, and this is what will happen when Paul's your MP. Somebody comes to the door, you don't have to like them, you don't have to think they voted Green, it doesn't matter. What's the issue they're fighting? We then fight with them, fight for them, and we never, ever give up. And that's how I got, believe it or not, Chris Alexander, Conservative Minister of Immigration, to agree to say this was a mistake, and Richard Germain gets permanent residency right away and on a path to citizenship right away. Because MP work sometimes doesn't get recognized. It's hard work and it's local. But what we have to be, every single MP in the Green Party's job, is to work for their constituents, not for me, and to work for Canada, not for the party. We will never, ever put power above principle, and we will never, ever put power above our planet and our children's future. And I promise you that, and beg you, actually, I shouldn't beg, but from the bottom of my heart, if any of you are on the fence, just think about what difference will it make when May 7th dawns and every newspaper in Canada has a headline, Greens take Nanaimo Ladysmith, and suddenly everybody's wondering, how do we change our policies? How do we up our game? How do we make sure that when we go to the polls in October 2019, you have a range of parties that demonstrate that they're committed to what needs to be done, not what's politically popular, but what's necessary. And we commit to always doing our beyond what's possible. We commit to doing what's impossible, because nothing less is required. Thank you.
Well, everybody knows Elizabeth, and I bet you everyone here knows Paul, but you're going, who's that tall lady on the stage? Who is the tall lady on the stage? Who has to readjust the microphone? Wake Waitip, Rissel Coyensquest. I'm also known as La Loya. I'm Rissel Coy. I'm La Loya. La Loya means seagull in the language of my grandmother from the Statliam Nation. I am honored to be here today in this beautiful territory, the Nanaimo people. I'm so honored to be here as a guest, coming from the Statliam and Secwepemc Nations, and I'm honored to be standing here as another candidate for the Green Party of Canada. You're irresistible. You're absolutely irresistible. because the Green Party is about the people. The Green Party is about the planet, and the Green Party, my dad loves me. I have a going to be 80-year-old dad. My dad's Dutch and my mother's First Nations. My dad's delighted and terrified about his baby girl doing what I'm doing. And he said, my girl, I'm going to campaign for you. I'm going to make those phone calls, because those are the things that need to happen, as so many of us are thinking about the values. One of the main ones I love that's on your card is about commitment. And he says, those are the sorts of things I want to talk about, but you know, my girl, how do I explain that? And I said, well, Papa, the easiest way I know how to explain it, the fastest way I know how to explain it, there's a big, beautiful document. It's not like the NEB. It's not about Trans Mountain, the 230,000 pages. It's a lovely, shortish document, covers all the major aspects of Envision Green. But I said, Papa, I can do you one better. Because what I know about Green Party people is we're inclusive, we're diverse, but when we make decisions, we're looking for making common sense decisions for the common good. That's simple. We may have rocket scientists who are looking after our transportation, more or less in a good way, as you said earlier today, Elizabeth, but we know that this is not rocket science. This is common sense. It's the knowledge. It's my father's generation. We know of our beautiful, they call them the silent generation, the generation of my father was born in 1939 in The Hague. We know about how you don't waste food. We know about how you look after one another and look after each other. We know about simple decisions and big decisions. And also, what I love is that we have people who understand when I say, maybe you don't know the words Hwai Consultant, as we say in our Schwetmestine language, which is all my relations, but you understand ecosystems and biospheres and how things are interrelated. We may not be using exactly the same words, but we have common values. We have common sense, and we can make good decisions for the greatest good. So when I heard about Paul Manley in this by-election, I knew I wanted to step forward because this is an opportunity for Paul, and as I'm representing Victoria and the beautiful, thank you, yes. I'm delighted to be representing Victoria, and I'll be frank, I went to the Sanghees and the Esquimalt, the Lekwungen-speaking people, and I sat with them before I went to my nomination meeting. I sat with them and I said, let's not talk about electoral district. Let's not talk about confederation. Let's talk about homeland. This is your homeland. You were the stewards of this land since time immemorial. Your roots, you talk about deep roots, the roots that go on and on and on to, I swear, to the center of Mother Earth. And I said, so I'm not asking for your vote. It would be nice, I'd appreciate it, but I am asking for permission to run. I'm asking for permission to be one to represent our great mother. And both times, and I just got to give a little wave to my campaign manager because he was sweating bullets because of the snowstorms that were going on. I didn't get to the Esquimalt until 3 days before my nomination meeting. And frankly, if they had said no, I wouldn't have gone. When I look at somebody like Paul, and I look at the deep, deep work, volunteer work that you've done, that he's not speaking on behalf of anybody. He's amplifying voices. He's creating space so people's true stories, their authentic stories, can be told. You know, I know the two Indigenous people who are running in this election, this by-election right now. I have immense respect for both of them because of the work that I've done in different places. But at this time, you have to ask yourself, it takes good people, yes, but more importantly, it takes a party that's going to always make the common sense decision for the common good. And the only party that I know, which is why I'm standing here today, who will do that is the Green Party of Canada. It takes commitment, it takes courage, and for me, I think I add in there, it takes a conscience, because you have to think beyond 7 generations, you have to think to all your lineage, and it's time for all of us, for May 6th, I encourage you, Be a good ancestor for all the future generations so that we can have a livable planet that is going to sustain us all. So with that, a lot of talking, but I just had to, irresistible, like I said, I just wanted to explain a little bit about myself here first and invite you now to the microphones to ask questions to Elizabeth and to Paul to get to know them a little bit more. Thank you. So don't be shy. There's 2 microphones, and and just I want to be clear, we do ask that you use the microphones. It's just helpful for everybody for hearing. So, let's see. Okay, yep, please go ahead. Yep, come right up.
Thank you. Thanks. I just want to say, I hope people, you will say how there's advanced polls also. Don't have to wait till the day.
That's right.
Yeah. And if you don't make
Go to the mic.
Go to Mike.
Yes. Elections Canada will be announcing the advance polls, and if you can't make it to an advance poll, you can go to the returning officer and then vote for me there.
Any day.
Any day.
26, 27, 28, and 29.
26, 27, 28, and 29 are the advance polls.
Yeah.
But where do you know where the returning office is?
It's in North Town Center, the old Rutherford Mall.
Okay, North Town Center, the old Rutherford Mall is where
Any day.
you can go there any day to the returning officer and vote.
Especially if you have to be out of town or something, yeah.
Yep.
We'll go over to this microphone first, and then we'll go over there. Please go ahead.
How about that program, once you get to Ottawa? Do you think that would be a priority before October?
Which one?
Program before October.
Oh, yes.
Not before October.
Well, the question about proportional representation is one where we're going to see some movement in other provinces before October. It's definitely going to be an election issue. I don't know how many of you know that on April 23rd, voters in Prince Edward Island will choose a new government. They may, in fact, it looks like they might pick the Green Party to form the next new government in Prince Edward Island. We're running in the lead right now. I know I sometimes feel it's a little bit biblical because in Prince Edward Island I have Peter and in Nanaimo Ladysmith I have Paul. And I'm not going to rob Peter to pay Paul, but on the other hand, I want Peter to be the Premier of Prince Edward Island and I want Paul to be the Member of Parliament for Nanaimo Ladysmith. But I'm not actually changing the subject because the subject matter of proportional representation includes on the ballot for Prince Edward Island April 23rd is the second time in 3 years that they vote on getting rid of first past the post. They won a referendum in December 2016 to shut down first past the post and move to mixed member proportional. But then the Premier of Prince Edward Island, I mean a Liberal, he would have said the same thing if he was Conservative, but anyway, Wade McLaughlin happens to be Liberal, and he said, okay, so mixed member proportional has won, but I don't think enough people voted. So the referendum doesn't count. Now, about 10 years before that, there'd been a referendum in Prince Edward Island where first past the post won, and the Premier of the day said, well, that settles that, we're keeping first past the post. But actually, fewer people voted in that one than voted in the one that wanted to go to mixed member proportional. We also have, of course, the Quebec government is currently planning legislation. Now, this is unusual. There's a lot about CAQ I won't agree with. That's the Coalition Avenir Québec. The Coalition Avenir Québec, and their premier is Bernard Legault, are committed to bringing in mixed member proportional, but without a referendum. So they're working on that right now. We will see in the next election campaign what Greens are going to bring forward in our platform. And by the way, another Southern Vancouver Island candidate, David Murner, who's running in Esquimalt Saanich-Sooke, is my critic. Paul mentioned he's the critic on trade issues. David Murner is the critic on democratic reform. And we're developing exactly what we will do in democratic reform after an election, preferably with a minority parliament in October, because we're going to have 6 parties elected to parliament in October. It's going to include the People's Party and the Conservatives and the NDP and the Liberals and the Bloc Québécois and a whole lot more Greens. It's likely to be a minority parliament where we're actually in a position to say we will support a government that we work on cooperatively if it meets our demands around climate, democracy, and reconciliation. And otherwise, we go back to the polls. And that will scare the other parties a lot more than it scares us. So we feel that we're in a good position to make progress on fair voting.
Please proceed.
Thank you. So I'm very excited to see Paul running again, and I'm really excited to see Rossell running in Victoria. I worked very hard for Joanne Roberts in 2015 for Victoria. I've since moved to this riding to go to school at VIU. Actually, Elizabeth might remember me. It's been a while though. So that being said, I think both of you are going to get elected again. I hope that we get 2 new MPs from Vancouver, Granville, and Markham-Stouffville, but regardless, I think that we're moving in a direction of growing the Green Caucus, and my question is, with the policy of not whipping votes, what is the plan for maintaining caucus cohesion while respecting the independence?
Can I speak?
I just wanted to add one little thing. Joanne Roberts went back home to Halifax for family matters. I want to be clear on that, so that and she's running for Halifax, and we wish her the best luck. I believe Elizabeth wishes to answer this question.
She's not going to whip me.
Yeah, I'm not whipping Paul. And Joanne has the capacity in Halifax, we just had a campaign launch there. We have very strong candidates. And I think Joanne will get to Parliament as the Member of Parliament for Halifax. So I'm really excited about that. But it is an interesting question. Without being able to whip votes, how do you hang together if you're negotiating with another party to say, and it's a matter of each individual MP signing on their own commitment that this is the best thing. So it's a personal contract between, and this is what happened. Picture, if you can, that moment when the 3 Green MLAs in BC joined with the ever disappointing caucus of NDPers to say, we're going to have a confidence and supply agreement. You may recall that to uphold the confidence and supply agreement, every single MLA signed. So it's a matter of personal commitment to a shared goal, not through whipping. And we will never have a situation where people can't vote their conscience. We want to make sure every Green MP, and it's our policy, it's in our bylaws, I can't change it, I wouldn't want to change it. The idea, and when Bruce Heyer was with me in Parliament, who was the Member of Parliament for Thunder Bay, Superior North, he sat as an independent for quite a while after he quit the NDP, joined the Greens after about a year of sitting as an independent. But we didn't always agree, because what the voters of Saanich Gulf Islands wanted me to do was not always what the voters of Thunder Bay Superior North wanted Bruce to do. So it's not just a hypothetical thing, I'm telling you. You can look at our voting records. The Conservatives who were in power those days used to look over at us, well, because as I said, we're really friendly. These are all my friends. And they'd like to tease me and say, Elizabeth, your caucus is getting out of control. What's happening? Can't you whip your caucus? And Bruce would do a kind of a pantomime of a man being whipped, say, oh. So, I mean, we just make them laugh, you know. We kept them entertained. But we didn't vote the same way. Because what's important is that MPs follow the only job description we have, which is in the Constitution of Canada, which says members of Parliament represent their constituencies, and there is nothing in the Constitution that even mentions the existence of political parties. It's an invention that is not entirely healthy to democracies. We're stuck with it. I do like the fact that the founder of the German Green Party, Petra Kelly, used to call the Greens the anti-party party, and that's why I really am comfortable where I am. But I'll leave us now, because there's something else more exciting about to happen.
Yeah. We do have some awesome stuff happening on stage, but we're going to go over here first, and then we'll go there, and then we'll come and there, and then we'll go to the stage.
Perfect. Hi. Just looking around and looking at the age demographic that's in here, and it disappoints me, yet I'm so happy to see people come out and voice their opinion and stand up for something, especially I've been born and raised here, but you talk about keeping the earth green for the younger generations, and that's a huge part of your motivation, but what is your plan to get them involved in this step? Because they are our future, and we're trying to save this world for that generation, the next generations. How are you going to get them involved?
Well, we actually have a bunch of young people involved in the campaign, and we welcome more to hop in, because it's really important for young people to be involved in politics. This is their future, and that's being decided. And we have a great team of young folks working with us. And we want to inspire more to get involved. I think there's a lot of cynicism about the way politics runs. They see it over and over, like the way Parliament works. You see how question period works, the thumping on the desks and the heckling and acting like worse than out of control kids in a grade 1 classroom, and it's not very inspiring. When I ran last time, we took the vote count up here, I think by about 9%. So we inspired more people to get out and vote, and that's part of what we're trying to do. We had a Young Greens club on campus, and they were basically declubbed, I guess it's called, by the Students' Union, which is kind of a NDP club, and we'd like to see students get active, but on a university campus where they're not allowed to, do certain political actions, then it makes it difficult to engage more young people. And we are going to be doing a climate rally on April 20th.
Oh, we should have mentioned it before, yes.
And April 20th at Maffeo Sutton Park, there's going to be music, entertainment, and we're trying to get the word out for young people to come out and get involved with that. Because it's true, the largest voting bloc is seniors, and they have the least at stake when it comes to climate change. I mean, they love their grandchildren, they love their nieces and nephews, but the young people really need to be motivated, so we're working on it. Yeah. Join our team. Talk to Sasha, or Caitlin, or Patrick, or Andrew in the back. Jake, yeah, there's a bunch of young folks back there that...
You even need sign delivery.
Everything, yeah.
Thank you.
All right, thanks.
Thank you.
I also know, and I see somebody who's active in that, I'm just going to give a shout out to Nina, because I know for myself, for example, I'm going to I'm in Victoria, the BC legislature. We have every first Friday of every month, we have the climate strike, Fridays for Future. I'm not there to speak, I'm there to listen. If they want to ask me questions, I respond to them. But that's what I do, is we also understand there's times where we have to, well, it's not sometimes all the time, we go where we find the people, where they want to hear us, where they're inviting us in. And so I'm sure that that's definitely part of what's going to be happening here. We're going to go over to this microphone over here, please.
Yeah, so I was curious about, thank you so much for something. I'm really I'm careful with my words right here, because apparently there's a writer named Gary Fletcher who has something to say about the fact that there are teachers who know about students doing strikes, student strikes. And it seems I've also been appalled to find out that some of my very highly educated friends here locally haven't even known about Greta Thunberg yet, or about the student strikes that are happening internationally. And people don't know that if they go and Google Australia student strike in November, that they'll see that 15,000 students walked out of the schools at that time. And that just on March 15th, I believe it was 150,000 in Australia alone, let alone all the thousands and thousands all across Europe. But here, apparently, it's considered extremely bad for people in education to know about these things. I work as a substitute teacher. I am now working on Mondays and on Fridays because of work that I do about climate action. I was actually thinking that the young folks from what Paula talked to me last time around with the high school voting they had last time, that the high school students overwhelmingly voted green.
Yeah.
And so I thought that putting the signs around the elementary schools, around where there are young parents that maybe were in high school and now have young children of their own might be a good strategy. Perhaps that's wrong, but I was wondering about that. So.
If I may, Russell, and thank you, Nina, can I just see how many of you have ever heard of Greta Thunberg? Put your hands up. That's a very much higher proportion than in most rooms. I've been doing town hall meetings across Canada in something called the Community Matters Tour. We've been to 23 communities, the Maritimes, Quebec, British Columbia, Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, traveling low carbon by train and bus. And Greta Thunberg's activism to be a child so traumatized by the climate news. You know, she at age 11 went into a deep depression. She stopped eating. She was diagnosed on the autism spectrum, and at 15 she realized she actually could do something, and she just took her sign outside her school in Stockholm and had climate strike just by herself, just one child. Sometimes when people ask, what can I do? I'm just one person. Imagine there's a child, she's not old enough to vote, and yet she's leading a movement that now has mobilized millions of children. And what I find shocking about our country's media, and to this point Nina was talking about the different crowds of people, it's clear to me that the failure of our national news media to cover what happened in this country on March 15th. Because 150,000 children marched in Montreal. Montreal alone had 150,000 marchers for climate action. And they were marching. There were climate strikes in where I used to live in Pictou, Nova Scotia. There were climate strikes in Halifax, climate strike in Victoria. There were more than 30 in Nanaimo. There were more than, I think, 50 communities in Canada that had climate strikers, and 150,000 in Montreal alone. And how many were on the lawn with you, Rochelle?
Thousands.
Thousands. So it should put our generation to shame to think that it takes a little girl in Stockholm to say, I want you to panic. I want you to act as though your house is on fire, because your house is on fire. And once you've taken action to save us, then you can be hopeful.
Can you tell them that she spoke at the UN?
She spoke at the spoke at the climate negotiation. I was Katowice, Poland, COP24, and that's where she said to the delegates, you don't have the courage to tell it like it is. Even that burden you leave to your children. She is a take no prisoners, no compromise climate activist who wants us as adults to know exactly what she thinks of us, which is next to nothing, because she doesn't believe we'll step up. So my standard of conduct and the Greens' standard of political behavior from now on is never to take our eyes off the ball. We're in a climate emergency, and I don't care how many pollsters or strategists want to step up and say, you know, the Green Party has a bad rap as a one-issue party, so you should talk less about climate and talk about, well, it's true, we're the first party that called for national pharmacare. We're the first party that called for same-sex marriage. We're the first party that called to ban asbestos. You can go through the list. We're not a one-issue party. But if we're going to be a one-issue party, I think survival is a damn good issue.
Thank you. I see this is being filmed tonight. Will this film or audio version of it be available? Because what a great learning tool this is. What a great thing to be able to tell people where to find this, young people, whatever. Be very inspiring for people that weren't able to be here tonight to be able to hear or see this.
I'm pretty busy these days, but I'm going to make sure that it gets up onto Facebook and YouTube, and a nice clear audio, because I got the mic right here, so that people can hear.
Thank you.
Under what?
It'll be on my political page. We'll put it on there, and we'll put it on the my political YouTube page as well, so people can watch.
And just one thing.
Yeah.
If you see good things like Greta, share them on Facebook. Make sure your friends know. There isn't a more profound, effective climate leader on this planet right now than that 16-year-old courageous child who doesn't let us off the hook and tells it like it is. But I gave a little talk the other day to Daughters of the Vote. It's only 10 minutes long, so you can share that on Facebook too, because I talked about Greta. We need to get people the sense of purpose and mission and hopefulness, because I'm hopeful, but I'm not hopeful if we do politics the way we've always done politics. We've got to change, and you in Nanaimo Ladysmith are going to lead the way. I know it, and I'm so grateful.
Yes!
We had a youth climate rally here, and we're having another one the youth are organizing for May 3rd, so watch for that on Facebook. We will post it on Facebook and come out and support.
April 20th, you mentioned April
I mentioned April 20th, that's a Green Party event. May 3rd is a youth event, and we will just be there to support them and to hold space for them and to listen to them. So watch for that. We'll be promoting that on our Facebook page. I want to introduce a special guest, George Quacksister, who is here. He's a hereditary chief, and he's been fighting the fish farm issue, and would like to just say a few words and a quick question for him.
It's an honor to be here speaking in Scottsdale territory. Gaelic, thank you. My name is Zooksways, George Quacksister Jr., hereditary chief of the Liquidor Nation, which is up in the Canberra River Zone, just to give you a kind of a better idea. I was born right home on the reserve there, still there. 3 years now I've been, like Paul said, I've been on the farm fish subject. 3 years now I've been with the Martin Sheen, the Sea Shepherd Conservation Society, examining the farm fish pens. We started in 2016, the first campaign. What I could see anyways before we even started the 2016 campaign is they're doing wrong out there. So it comes to 2017 campaign, I decided on my own to go onto the farm fish pens and put a GoPro camera into the pens, which I gather a lot of you probably seen the videos. Who all seen the videos here? So anyways, it's way up there disgusting what we learned through those videos, which is, I did that for 6 weeks plus. I examined 40 farms, 2 to 3 farms a day kind of a thing. And what that showed us was in those farm fish pens, there's tons of our baby fish in those pens, and they're getting fed on. That's 35 years feeding on our baby fish. Feeding on our baby fish. So anyways, I seen baby halibut in there. Every baby wild stock fish you can think of is in those pens. And they're getting fed on by those farm fish, which is way up there disgusting. We got 3 years coming now. Back-to-back sockeye seasons coming in back-to-back this summer and the next summer and the next summer. We're going to find out this summer if we're going to hit 0 sockeye or be very close to 0. The same with the 2 years following. 2020, I kind of think it's going to be our first 0 actually, for the fact is there was only 800,000 sockeye to the Fraser River. That's next to 0. So because of those farm fish pens, our herring are vanishing, our salmon are vanishing, our oligans are vanishing. Everything's going kaput. The viruses in there is way up there disgusting. By the 3rd week I was investigating farms, I'm standing on there with a camera and a pen. I'm looking around, I've seen so much poison up frickin' water already by then. I say to myself, is it even safe to eat any prawns or crabs or anything out here? And that was the 3rd week I was out there, let alone the 6th week. By the time I finished the 6 weeks, when I got home, I thought of it, what I seen. That fish is poison. All 40 farms that I checked out. You could see it all in the videos. Pictures don't lie. It's all poisoned up. Which brings me back to a video, Salmon Confidential. That's what it shows in that little video back in 2012 or 13. It shows the waters a different color, poisoned up looking waters. Well, that's exactly what's going on out there. So anyways, that's way up there disgusting to me. Hereditary chiefs protect our waters and lands. We have the stewardships to do that. Ta-da. So anyways, back 35 years ago, the NDP are the ones that put it in. Lord behold, a couple years, 2 years back, was it? John Horgan and Claire Tavina is announcing in a big house in Alert Bay to all the chiefs there. John Horgan's endorsing Claire Tavina. They're announcing in a big house, vote for Claire. We'll get farm fish out of the water. That was a couple of years ago. Where are they? We can't afford to spend another week or two. So since then, I think it was towards the end of 2018, I've served eviction notices in my regala. 2 Marine Harvest office, 2 Cermak office. I've gone to Claire Tavina's office. I passed her a couple of pages. You owe those chiefs and people up Alert Bay an apology. You basically lied in that big house. So what's going on now is it's common sense. That's just the farm fish subject. Common sense. The red, blue, and orange are just catering to foreign industries and corporations, which are totally destroying our waters and lands, even the drinking water. We get to the pipeline subject, the Eastern Bridge there, when they raided the bridge, the RCMP raided that bridge. You all know the bridge they raided. RCMP raided that. They're bulldozing around there and all that kind of darn stuff. And Lord behold, who do you see with a big smile on CTV News the next morning? John Horgan. I love LNG. How do you think that makes me feel? So I'm very upset with him at Trudeau, believe me. I'm very upset. So I've watched like what they announced here, the Daughters of the Votes, and the little lady Greta. I've watched them. Awesome warriors. Vote green. It's a must to vote green to save this country. These warriors right here, this country needs this right now. Seriously.
So we're going to take one more question right here. I'm sorry, Nita, we got to go on the question already from you. So just going to finish up with this one. This is your time. Thank you. And thank you for your patience. I think that was worthwhile. You want to there you go. Awesome.
I actually have 4 questions, but if you don't have time from
Is the battery dead on there?
First of all,
Oh, no, can you just a quick technical moment here.
Yeah, maybe grab the other mic for him. It sounds like.
is this?
Whoa!
You fixed it.
Oh, sorry.
Are we awake? Hello. All right. So maybe not 4. We want to be conscious every time, but we invite you to ask a question. So can you pick your top question for us?
Well, that's tough.
You know?
Well, I guess, first of all, I'm hoping that we can get Paul elected so he can help protect our watershed. You don't have to answer that. Now, I have to say that I have boated up in Campbell River and in those islands, and I've seen those fish pens, and I know that they've had accidental releases up there, and it is bad. So I guess I want you to talk about green jobs, Paul. And I'm tired of our governments inventing programs that they can make into bureaucratic job creation. And they can do simple things like if we need to take action, then just take the taxes off solar panels, wind, electric vehicles, used electric vehicles, because then there'll be a market, somebody will be able to buy a used vehicle, and this is going to take off, and it's going to take off anyway, but why don't they just do the simple, common sense things in Ottawa and get the green jobs going?
Yeah, so one of the things about our climate crisis is that 50% of the energy that we use in this country is wasted. And we could have jobs, when I did my home energy retrofit, there were subsidies available, to help me pay for those retrofits. And I hired crews to come in and blow in insulation and change out windows and install heat pumps. And those are all good paying jobs. And I raised money to put solar panels on Nanaimo Food Share's roof as a demonstration site, so you can go on to nanaimofoodshare.ca/solar and see what those panels produce for energy on any given day at any given hour. That building was a test building for home energy efficiency back in 1999, like a while ago. And now we just put a heat pump there. So it's, we're taking that building off the oil tank and the frac pipe. And there's good jobs doing that. There's really good jobs doing that. There's good jobs doing geothermal. There was a plant in Estevan in Saskatchewan, and 150 workers and $100 million. And when you extrapolate that, at 5,000 homes for the energy, when you start to extrapolate that into what can you do with $4.5 billion instead of spending it on a pipeline? What could you do with geothermal alone? We're pouring all this money into Site C, which is a travesty. It's going to cost ratepayers a fortune. And that was approved by the federal government. So it's a matter of priorities. And when we get our priorities straight, we can be doing a lot more. We have a university here that is an outstanding beacon of knowledge generation. And there's all kinds of research going on there that it's generating an economy here, a knowledge-based economy that we should be building off of, right? And we've got a fantastic tourism industry. We've got great cultural industries. We have this quality of life here that is very attractive to people to live in, and we should be using those natural assets to draw those kind of jobs in industry. And Elizabeth wants to say something.
Wait, don't have any interrupt you.
Go ahead, come along.
Okay.
I'm not gonna wrap
I
it
just
up
want to
because
say
we're
that most politicians, I mentioned this earlier, when they're talking jobs, they're talking corporate profits. We never forget, the number one employer by far in Canada is small business. Local businesses employ far more people than big multinationals. And the Liberals are currently taking credit for job increases where they've provided subsidies and supports to businesses that then hire temporary foreign workers, and they count that in the job statistics of jobs created. We have to actually look at the issue of, we really actually have a problem that more of us are going to be seniors soon than are part of the working population. The work that needs to be done in this country, we actually have a labor shortage. We have skilled jobs that are needed, and I have more employers come in to see me as an MP who can't find workers for the businesses they're running that they want to expand than I have unemployed people coming in to see me because they can't find a job. Now that's not just Saanich Gulf Islands, that's right across the country. When I talk to mayors, when I talk to communities, there are skilled worker shortages right across the country, and yet you'd think from the rhetoric about the pipelines that we were desperate for jobs. By the way, in that 23,000 pages that I printed out from Kinder Morgan, they did say how many jobs they will create if the pipeline expansion were to go ahead, and the number is 90. 40 in Alberta, 50 in BC, and for 2 years during construction, 2,500 jobs in construction, but they would not rule out hiring temporary foreign workers. So when we talk about employment, never forget there are already more people working in green tech and clean tech than in the oil sands, There are jobs across this country and good, important, meaningful work to be done, which can also include being a poet or a playwright. It can also include running your own restaurant, growing the food for that restaurant. We need to think about local, life-giving employment. And just the way we had to say to the asbestos miners in Quebec, we're shutting your jobs down because they're too dangerous. We'll retrain you in something else. We have to, on a planned basis, tell anyone making money on fossil fuels that it's over soon, and we'll retrain you for something that doesn't threaten your children's future. Thank you.
So we've come to the end of our time, and I am hoping that you will support me. And I have in my life very strong support from my wife, who is here, and you can stand up, Sam. She is, I would not be able to do this without her support and love and care and understanding, and also my daughter Avon, who lives with us. And you know, it's a lot of work, and it's a struggle, and it's people, you're under the microscope when you go into community life. And so I love you, Sam, and thank you for your support and your love and your help with me taking this step, because it's important to me, and you know it's important to me. So thank you. Thank you so much for coming. I'm going to pass the mic one last time to my good friend, Alain Goldenblatt, who has got an ask for you.
All right. So this is my job. I'm Paul's campaign manager, and we need help. So there's a bunch of people here in the audience that are already volunteering for Paul's campaign. There's a bunch of people here in the audience who have already kicked in and donated to this campaign. But we need, this campaign is people fueled. There are campaigns right now in Nanaimo that are actually paying people to go door to door. Not this campaign. This campaign, people step up and volunteer. Who here is feeling inspired tonight by what's going on here? Who here in the audience has already volunteered on this campaign? That's amazing. Who is ready? And you don't have to commit to 20 hours, you don't have to commit to 30 hours. Who's ready to commit a couple of hours, to come down to the office and commit a couple of hours now who has not yet volunteered? Amazing. Thank you so much. So in the back there, Caitlin, our amazing volunteer coordinator, Andrew's over there, Patrick, Sasha's over there. Sasha's our canvassing coordinator. Please go to the back there and fill out volunteer requests, volunteer forms. And if you can afford it, we do need to raise money. So if you can afford it, pledge over there. We're taking checks or credit cards. We really appreciate it because campaigns cost a lot of money. Thank you so much.
And democracy is a participatory activity.
Thank you so much, everybody. And we have lawn signs as well that you can take home with you tonight if you do not have a lawn sign yet in front of your house. Thank you so much to Estelle. Thank you so much to Paul. Thank you, George Cox-Sister Jr. Thank you, Elizabeth May. And thank all of you and to all the volunteers.